On today's show, we're talking to Regan Holt, the former founder and CEO of Uprising Technologies, which was a venture that she started after serving as an advancement services leader at Northwestern University. Regan is our newest full-time employee at EverTrue, and we're really excited to learn about her intrapreneurship and entrepreneurship journey and to see how she can help us take things to the next level here at EverTrue. Here we go. Welcome to today's episode of the Raise podcast. I am very excited to introduce my newest colleague, Regan, the Advancement Services Whisperer Holt. Regan, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Regan and I first met several years ago when she was just starting out on her own entrepreneurial journey with a company called Uprising. And I can say that from our first meeting and thereafter, I was very hopeful that we would get a chance to put our heads together and collaborate around the issues that we're trying to address in the advancement space. And so after several years of getting to know each other and some friendly competition and also some great recommendations among peers in the sector to try to collaborate, we have come to an opportunity here where Regan has just joined our team and is going to be helping really take things to the next level from a data and insight perspective. And so very excited to welcome you, Regan.
Thanks. Yeah, no, I'm really excited to be part of the team.
So why don't you just give us a little bit of background on who you are and why I refer to you as the Advancement Services Whisperer, whether you like that or not.
Well, I think when I started in the advancement industry, it was really as a software trainer actually for Advanced Web, which at that point in time was from a company called BSR. And that was a long time ago, right? And so I spent most of my career at Northwestern University as a software trainer, and then I got into, dabbled in report programming and writing data feeds, and eventually getting into portfolio management and leading up efforts for all the advancement systems projects and new systems implementations.
If I may, at what moment did you first get exposed to even what advancement is? I mean, that's a word that we all say so many times a day that when you move beyond the walls of the sector, most people don't even understand. But when was your introduction originally to the space?
It was when I was interviewing at Northwestern. Prior to Northwestern, I worked at Gateway Computers as a software trainer. And when I went to interview at Northwestern, they had posted this job for a software trainer and a help desk person. And I went to this interview and I was just blown away actually by the operation that goes into philanthropy. I remember walking in, they were in the middle of Campaign Northwestern, and I walked into the advancement office and they had, a big sign that indicated how much they'd raised. And I was sitting there waiting for them to come get me for the interview. And I was looking at the sign thinking, oh my gosh. And then I really got to understand it better as I was doing the training and training frontline fundraisers and annual fund folks, and they were using acronyms like LIBUNT and SciBunt and PieBunt, and
Wait, what was the last one you just said?
And PieBunt.
What's a PieBunt, just for the sake of the audience?
Previous year, but not this year.
Got to add that to the acronym list. PieBunt.
PieBunt, yeah. So I actually thought they were different kinds of bugs, and in my training materials then, whenever we talked about any of those, I had little ladybug bugs.
And so you're in this role coaching gift officers. And what is that like? What are you excited about in that role? You've got to have a whole host of personalities. I'm sure you had people who were really excited about embracing technology, and probably at that time people who didn't even want to use email. And so what was the sort of spectrum of gift officers that you supported, and I guess what stands out as in that part of your journey?
Yeah, I think, if we think about it, I'm going to date myself here, but that was in 1999.
I didn't ask you to date yourself, but you did. Okay, so it's 1999.
Sets the context for where technology was at in advancement, right? because I had people that didn't know how a mouse worked, and we were still using mouses with rollerballs. And so, I had people that I was training on how to use a system. They'd never used one before because prior to that it was a mainframe. We were teaching them basically how does Windows work, as well as how to use it, Advance, and how to put in a contact report. So we had fundraisers sending their assistants because the fundraisers didn't want to have to use computers. So it was definitely it was kind of a different era at that point in time. And at that point, it was just trying to get folks to understand what was actually really a heavy lift from a user experience perspective, because systems at that point were designed more to reflect the data model of the back end than they were to reflect how people actually worked. And so it was trying to get frontline fundraisers who didn't really care about technology at that point in time to be willing to change kind of how they worked to fit into this bucket that developers at some software company had predefined.
And so at that time, you're meeting probably a majority, if not all of the frontline fundraisers at Northwestern. Are there any people who you met at that time as a trainer that you've been able to sort of watch their careers advance? I mean, that was basically 20 years ago. Anybody stand out along the way where you remember teaching them advanced web, and where are they now?
Right. Yeah. So I would definitely say I didn't teach them advancement, but I was teaching them, the CRM or doing help desk for them. But some of the folks that I loved working with, and that it's kind of funny to think about how all of our careers have changed, are Matt Termolin, who's now up at Syracuse. He was, I think, associate development officer at the Weinberg College of Arts and Sciences at that point in time. Eve Jeffers, who's now the head of advancement for the Art Institute of Chicago. At that point in time, she was part-time, working, I think, in foundation relations or corporate relations. Heather Ruggio and I actually both got into advancement around the same time. It was, there's just been a lot of folks that we've kind of stayed in touch with or reconnected various times over the years.
And so you're working in that role, you're getting to know all of these folks, introducing them to technology that maybe they'd never been exposed to, but at the same time observing challenges, problems, gaps in the sector, and you were able to advance your career with some great upward mobility at Northwestern, but at the same time, you started thinking about problems and opportunities. And I'm just curious, which ultimately led you to found a company called Uprising, which we can talk more about, but when you sort of think about the slow burn, perhaps, that led to you ultimately taking the leap, what were some of the challenges or opportunities that you observed in that role? Right,
yeah. I think, when I got involved in advancement, the world was a bit of a different place. So, we didn't have really mobile apps, and we didn't have cloud apps. So it was a different place. And over the years, the technology that I was working with wasn't changing, but the world was changing, right? So the society's adoption of consumer technologies in the workplace, everybody getting their own mobile device. So it just all increased expectations among our staff, as well as our external customers, like, our alumni, our donors, our volunteers. Everybody was expecting now to have apps on their mobile device that were as insightful and accurate and current as social media. And they would, be sent a spreadsheet. And so I think that was definitely something that throughout my career became a bigger and bigger sort of gap as sort of people became more technologically savvy in the workplace. The other, thing that was happening is legacy applications. So the underlying data and the siloed organizations that are managing that data made it really difficult for advancement and alumni relations to keep up with where people were. And people were changing jobs more often or, moving around more often. And so all of this led to just a lot more data and us trying to take advantage of that data without actually having the more modern technology to work with. And we can't just keep adding FTEs to deal with it, right?
And so I imagine, one of the defining characteristics of this sector that we've always enjoyed is just how tight-knit it is, how collaborative it is. And I know within the advancement services space and within certain communities, whether it's the sort of legacy, BSR, Advance, now Lucian community, Blackbaud communities, et cetera, there is a lot of sharing. And so I imagine that some of these challenges you were observing, you were also perhaps lamenting at conferences, or were there key peers that you were able to confide in as you were thinking about how quickly the outside world was changing and how slowly it seemed like the advancement landscape was evolving?
Yeah, we would all get together at conferences, right? Like some of the folks that, I consider, friends just because we've known each other so long, like, Terry Callahan and Deb Cunningham and Heather and, there's so many people, but we would all get together every year and talk about the challenges that we were facing and how people are solving different problems. And so, it really is a close-knit group and a lot of knowledge sharing and just a lot of really great people.
And I imagine that there was a shared perspective, maybe not on the solutions, but on the problems that were facing the sector. There are a lot of people who have worked in those roles, who've experienced the same challenges that you experienced, who did not take the leap to start a company. And so, what was it like going from observing the challenges around siloed data, legacy systems, slow adaptation of mobile, social, digital, to actually jumping and starting a company, and just sort of take me through the moments that led up to that leap?
Right. There was actually a very specific sort of set of occurrences or sequence of events when I was at Northwestern, and we had been given this, objective by the new senior management who had come in at the presidential level, the VP of advancement, and then the board of trustees to really modernize how we interacted with our volunteers and our alumni through our online presence. And so that involved, to provide the experience that we wanted to provide, involved us going through a big RFP process. And I was really kind of astonished that there weren't tools out there that did what we needed to do without it requiring a huge amount of lift by the team at Northwestern, right? So we wound up having to build a bunch of custom stuff and integrate a lot of systems, and we still couldn't really get it quite where we wanted it, right? Like there were still things that I had talked about with my colleagues at Northwestern and that we had brainstormed about and put on our wish list for the new platform, which is our Northwestern, that we weren't really fully able to deliver. So I had that in the back of my mind, and I was also on the executive user group for one of the bigger players in the industry when it comes to software, and they were talking about their new software that they were building and going to be launching in the next few years. And I saw it, and I didn't really feel like it was going to solve some of those core operational problems, and there were still these gaps that I had to fill, or that my team had to fill at Northwestern, that weren't going to be addressed by these new systems at that point in time that I was seeing, right? So I was frustrated by that because I was like, okay, this is going to be a 7-figure project, and we're still not going to be able to get where we need to get. And at the same point in time, I was really frustrated by the fact that we were trying to tread water and keep up with all of the data and all of these data feeds and integrations. But the amount of data was increasing and the complexity of data was increasing. And it's like we were just having a we were getting pulled under, by the undertow, really, of the data undertow. And so all of this sort of culminated in me being pretty frustrated. And then there were some personal life events that meant that I had to change my role at Northwestern and transition from being a full-time employee to a consultant. And at that point, a friend of mine had also, he had been working with us at Northwestern as a consultant, and he and I stayed in touch, and he gave me a call, and he was like, hey, remember that thing you were trying to get us to do, that search, and that modern kind of experience you were trying to get us to do on the project at Northwestern? I'm playing around with some new data technology, and I think I can do it now. And he showed it to me, and I saw it, and I was like, that's awesome. Let's show our friends at Northwestern and University of Chicago. And so, that's really how it came about. It was, so Mike Basil stumbling across, or not stumbling, just starting to play with new technology and realizing that this new data technology allowed us to solve the problems that we couldn't solve with that legacy technology at Northwestern.
One of the advantages you had from day one, which I will say I was very jealous of, is that you were really an insider and you had these pre-existing relationships, and you could just call up Northwestern and Chicago and get feedback at the earliest moments. And I was fortunate as an outsider to have some incredible support via folks at Brown, where I had been a volunteer, but it's really different sort of being that ambitious volunteer who wants to improve things versus truly being somebody who had grown up in the sector. And so what was it like making some of those first basically customer discovery calls, probably reaching out to friends who you knew really well, and how did you go from that initial concept of new technology is enabling solutions to problems we've all been dealing with that we don't believe the traditional vendors are going to address? What was the next step once you started getting that feedback?
Yeah, we just continued to build out a prototype, and I will say one definitely an area where I may have been an insider with advancement services, but you actually had been a volunteer trying to do fundraising, right? I never actually did fundraising, so I was building everything from an advancement services perspective because that was my realm, and I knew the problems that we were having and trying to solve them, and I called we built out a little bit more of the proof of concept, and then I started calling up my friends. I actually was living down in Tennessee at that point in time, and I called my friend Michael Carter at the University of Tennessee and said, hey, you want to meet for lunch? I want to show you something. And I pulled up my phone and showed it to him, and he had said to me at that point in time, he said, Regan, the mobile stuff is great, but you got to go after data, because data is really what's a big challenge for us. And I think that was really I still to this day when I see Michael, thanks for that advice back in 2014, because the mobile experience is super important for frontline fundraisers. Advancement services, what's really important for advancement services is making sure those frontline fundraisers have the data they need to be successful.
No, I think that's why I'm excited about what we might be able to accomplish over the coming years, because you just said you built everything from an advancement services perspective, and we, I think, have probably been on the other end of the spectrum. How do we really optimize for the frontline fundraiser, for the annual giving professional, for the end user? And I think the right answer is somewhere in the middle, which is the absolute best data possible. But if that can't be exposed in truly bleeding edge mobile and web user experiences, it will not be activated as well as it can be. And so I feel like it's actually in an interesting way, we went into this maybe naively assuming that of course advancement services would prioritize serving the advancement end user experiences over all else. But there is some tension and conflict over what matters most, and I think that's probably been a challenge for us with some of the advanced services leaders in the space who maybe have been frustrated with how focused on the gift officer we are at the expense of perhaps some of the data-oriented work that you've done. So you must have had a window into that. I'm curious to know, as you started Uprising, how aware you were of our work at EverTrue. You obviously had to look at it and say, they're doing some things well, but there are some clear gaps that I can go address. And I'm sure you had customers who shared that feedback as well.
Yeah, I completely agree with your assessment that, because of where you were coming from, you focused on that user experience. And because of that, EverTrue is really, has a great front end, and has spent a lot more time thinking about what those frontline fundraisers need. When I was, selling with Uprising and helping, our current clients, that was honestly one of the things that when we were in competitive scenarios with EverTrue, that's the feedback I got a lot from, our friends Nadine and Peter at Pomona, and a number of other folks was, EverTrue's got this awesome front end and the frontline fundraisers really love it. We in advancement services really like the way that Uprising is going to help streamline the interfaces and improve the quality of the data. And it would be so awesome if you guys would partner. I think that that's why we wound up with some common clients, right? Was because for the schools that were able to do it, they wanted the best of both worlds, and they were using both EverTrue and Uprising. Anyway, I think I maybe got off topic there, but I totally agree. I think that's what, one of the things that's going to be great about working together.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so you just mentioned some of your early clients, but who was your very first client, customer at Uprising? Who said yes first?
Northwestern University.
And when you think about if there are other folks in the advancement space who've been thinking about starting a company in the sector, I'd love to get your perspective, advice, lessons learned, learning curve as a new CEO. If there's somebody who's feeling pain or frustration out there, what guidance would you give?
Well, I think it starts with intrapreneurship, right? There are some of my friends in the industry are just doing an awesome job of really being entrepreneurs within their own organization. Some of the work that, if I think about, obviously, some of the folks I already mentioned, the folks like, Sarah Barr and Ellen Marie Muehlbacher at University of Chicago, Catherine Floyd. So all of these folks, they're all, and so many of our clients, the reason that they started working with Uprising was because they had that innovative sort of streak, and they saw the need for it, and they were willing to take that risk and try to push things forward. I think that it's starting with that, right? It's pushing things forward within your organization and encouraging agility and openness to adopting new technologies, taking the risks, knowing that they're risks. Obviously, some of them, they took a risk on Uprising, and I really appreciate it. And I think we did make a lot of progress, but we, in the end, I hope that they continue to do so. And, if somebody sees a challenge and they want to solve it, there's this sense of resignation that used to make me so mad, which is part of the reason that Uprising is called Uprising. But I can't tell you the number of times that I would be sitting in meetings and there'd been people who had been at an organization for a really long time, and they'd say, oh, well, this just isn't how we work. That's not how we do things. That's not how we've been doing them for 20 years, and we're fine. And, my attitude is, that's what Blockbuster said. That's what Tower Records said. So the reality is that we can't continue to have that attitude. So we need to start by just changing the attitude, and then change it internally. And if you've got an idea and you think that it can make a difference, then go after it, right? That's whether it's internal to the organization or whether you're willing to really take the jump and you're in a situation where you can take a jump to start your own company. Either way, it's going to make a difference.
Yeah, I just had a LinkedIn exchange with a gentleman who is leading prospect research at an institution that will remain unnamed, but he was expressing that frustration yesterday. To be perfectly and painfully honest, the roadblock starts with a lack of leadership at many levels. That may change with our new president, but a monumental change in culture has to take place as well. So that guy, I think, has a little bit of uprising spirit there where he wants to, stand up, make change, affect change, and he just can't. He actually, I won't go into more detail, but I do think that is a huge issue. And obviously we have gravitated towards customers and relationships for people who say, why not? As opposed to why might we do something different. And it really does take incredible commitment and persistence to get there because there are so many cultural and budgetary roadblocks for sure. It's ironic that we have many customers that will spend millions of dollars on new systems that are described after the fact as okay, fine, not great, or horrible, right? Somewhere on that spectrum. Cannot think of a single conversation I've had with somebody who said, got our new CRM, it is incredible.
Right.
Like, why is that? After millions. Now, I can think of a lot of Uprising customers who described Uprising as being really incredible, game-changing, innovative. We have a lot of customers who describe us in that manner, and we're not charging millions of dollars. And so where's the disconnect? Why is it sometimes easier to sell a $1 million just okay, fine, or not great solution relative to a much lower cost, higher quality solution?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, to some extent, people feel safe with things that are comfortable, and a lot of the big players that are sort of re-platforming the same operational business processes, that makes sense to people who have the decision-making power and the budget to make big decisions, because it is providing a modern skin on this 20-year-old world they're used to working in. I absolutely agree that, there are a lot of organizations out there that do have folks that are seeing the need to really take a step back and say, before we spend $2, $3, $4, $5 million on a systems implementation project, let's really look at how is this going to help our operation. And those are the conversations that I think are really exciting to have, and thinking about not just how the software is going to work, or what technology it's going to use, but how is it going to just change how people work. And it was really interesting to me when I was at Northwestern. I was there through a number of senior management teams, and they're all great. Northwestern is an awesome institution. I'm a big, bleeding purple person. But I will say that one of the things that's awesome about the team that's there now is that, they are willing to kind of push the envelope and really use data to drive improvements in fundraising. And that's what we're seeing at organizations like MIT and a lot of the schools that are really thinking in a more sort of strategic, proactive, sort of futuristic way about how things can function.
Yeah, I think that's a good segue. We've talked a lot about the past, the history, lessons learned with Uprising. Let's talk a little bit about the future. You've spent the last several years, right, assessing our work, the competitive landscape in the advancement sector in general, gaps and so forth. When you think about now being a team member at EverTrue, what are the weaknesses that you're most excited to improve on here at EverTrue?
I think that EverTrue is the platform as it is now has a lot of awesome things that I wish that we had the resources or time to do, or were on my wish list for Uprising. But I do think that we can make it even better by improving the ease of integrations, the speed with which we interact with data, push and pull data, the types of data, and then thinking about how we can use sort of automation of data ingestion and merging and identity resolution to make fundraising much more powerful and to really identify what people are passionate about and find people that really would love to support specific causes that may not align with their academic affiliation. And I think that is where I think EverTrue has started to make progress when it comes to pulling in the Facebook data, but and some of the engagement data, and I just think we can blow that out and take it a lot farther.
I agree, and we've had a bunch of conversations where there is a paradigm shift occurring that is enabled by data that aligns with what fundraisers have always wanted to do, which is understand what somebody's interested in and then find a way to map those interests to philanthropic opportunities. And I think that so many fundraisers have started with a list of capacity-rated individuals and not much else, and been told to go out and get to know those people and do their prospecting and do the cold outreach. And I think that there is such an opportunity to flip that and really start with knowing what people are interested in based on online and offline behaviors that can be aggregated and then displayed in a very intuitive manner, so that before I reach out to that individual, yes, I'll know their capacity, but I also have a really good sense of how they've been engaged, what they've been engaged with, what they might be interested in more broadly. And that is such a massive leap forward. It sounds simple, but I think this idea of starting with interests and then working towards philanthropic capacity versus starting with capacity and then spending all this time trying to get a meeting is really going to be a game changer. And it already is becoming one for many of our partner institutions.
Yeah, I completely agree.
And I think one of the things I love about the opportunity to collaborate with you and your perspective is you will say words like automation of data ingestion or identity resolution, which sometimes can just go over people's heads. Like, why does that matter? Those are buzzwords or technical buzzwords. Why does that matter to me as a fundraiser? And I think you also said things like, by doing those things, we can better understand what people are interested in or what they care about. And so it's not the technology for the sake of the tech, but really, our mission at EverTrue is to build relationships in pursuit of a better world. We really think technology can make that happen and enable that. And a lot of the technical improvements that you're going to help us execute, I know, are going to align with that objective. When you think about the higher ed sector more broadly, zooming out, if you could wave a wand and just change one thing about advancement or one thing about the sector, are there any items that stand out or burning issues that you'd really like to address?
Yeah, I think that the number one thing would be improved agility and the ability to accelerate how quickly things adjust to adapt to the world around us, right? So I just think that a philosophical shift needs to take place across the enterprise and from the top down, that recognizes that technology and data management are no longer back office maintenance tasks, and they need to recognize that they are strategic assets that will become increasingly critical to gaining the philanthropic support that's required for these organizations to continue to make that meaningful positive change that they're going for. When I was getting into the industry, at almost every school that I went to, including our own, the IT staff and the bio and the records teams were frequently, in the basement, not included in the meetings, thinking about the future. And, we are starting to see with some of these more, forward-thinking organizations where they're creating, entire senior level positions about, strategic operations and rethinking how they organize data and their just business functions to really prioritize the use of technology to improve how they're operating. And so I just hope that I guess if I had one wish, it would be improving, the agility and the way that people think about data, right?
Yeah, no, and I think one of the challenges or opportunities for folks that are in more data-oriented positions is how do we talk about the impact of the recommendations that we're making, right? We talk so much about data or social or digital or apps or mobile or trip planning or whatever it may be. But if you're going to get buy-in from a senior leader, you've got to be able to talk about revenue, pipeline, productivity, retention, upgrades, and you've got to be able to quantify that. And if you cannot connect, whether it's us as a vendor or you as an entrepreneur trying to make change at an advancement organization, if you cannot map a technology recommendation to some kind of business metric and that is measurable and ideally revenue oriented, I think it's an uphill battle. And so that's a challenge for us. I know it was a challenge for you. I think it's a challenge for a lot of the aspiring entrepreneurs in the sector who don't want to be, Milton from Office Space in the basement. I just had an image of that as you were describing,
I almost said that too, the red stapler. Yeah.
So no more red staplers. We got to rise up out of the basement, and we're excited about being a partner in that journey because it really is, again, at that intersection of the data, engagement, analytics, but then aligning that with workflows and user experiences that are going to drive revenue. And we've got to be able to effectively prove that, guarantee it. Otherwise, the inertia is too strong.
One thing you'll appreciate, one of our clients, when we indexed their data for the first time and aggregated data from their CRM with data from third-party systems as well as integrated systems, within the first week, we found that organization 750 new major gift prospects that hadn't been tapped. And so I think, it's coming up with metrics like that and helping these organizations see that possibility. Like, look, here are all these people that have the capacity and the interest and the personal passion to support your organization that we're able to help you, build a relationship with. By identifying them, with this data and technology. And the more statistics that we can get like that, the easier it's going to be for those entrepreneurs to make the case, right?
Absolutely, and I think it's incumbent on us to not only be able to use data to surface those 750 new prospects instantly, okay? But then we need to be able to measure what happens. And did that 750 new prospect pool turn into 75 new proposals, which turned into 7.5 gifts that equal $10 million? That is how we are going to really be able to really prove the ROI. And we've been talking a lot about this idea of the giving funnel, and I think you've been so focused on this identification and discovery layer. We've been a little bit more focused on the prospect development, moves management, solicitation, close stewardship phase, that I think putting that together is going to allow us to not only do the identification, but really ensure that after identification, action happens, that follow-up happens, and that we're able to measure the impact and the outcome. And I'm very, very excited to work on that together. When you think about other, closing thoughts, questions for me, or just reflections as you start this new chapter at EverTrue, I'd welcome any additional commentary.
I think the main thing that I just still continue to believe in and to hope continues to happen is that those entrepreneurs and innovators within the organizations don't get frustrated and give up, right? Like, I think that we just all of us have to keep pushing forward and keep trying, and that's the only way that we're really going to help higher education see this sort of pivotal jump in the evolution of how we operate as far as advancement goes. So
I think it's a great concluding thought, and so I'm going to just go ahead and dedicate this episode to all those entrepreneurs. Rise up, don't give up. Okay, that's our message. We are excited to be partners on the journey, excited to have the Advancement Services Whisperer on our team. I know many of you out there are excited that you can talk to Regan instead of me at EverTrue, and that's all good. We're humble enough to acknowledge that and excited about where this can all lead. So with that, Regan, thank you for being an entrepreneur in the sector and for pushing us over the last several years and hopefully pushing us a lot more over the next several years. So with that, we're going to close today's episode. Thank you, Regan. Signing off.
Great. Thanks. Bye-bye.